Thank you very much, Christina. We already have plenty of questions for you. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So the first is a request from Rita Serra, who is working in participatory research with autistic people from Portugal. And so she would love to know more about the suicide prevention work and the work you've been doing with people with intellectual disabilities and pregnancy.
Great. So I don't have, I can go on and on about it. So our our suicide prevention project is led by Anne Kirby. She's the principal investigator, and Whitney is her community project lead. That's again another NIH-funded project. They've worked, they've done a bunch of qualitative research to understand suicide experiences, and now they're actually adapting a community-based, a kind of community-focused suicide prevention program that was originally created for Native American communities, and they're adapting it to work for the autism community. They've just finally finished developing their intervention. They're just about to start pilot testing it. But Anne Kirby is the principal investigator for that project. I'm involved just as a mentor, and it's a fantastic project. In terms of intellectual disabilities, we try to have people with intellectual disabilities on all of our projects. So that's not a specific project. That's everybody. But we do have a project right now that Dr. Willie Horner Johnson is leading at Oregon Health and Science University with Alex, blanking on Alex's last name, as her community project lead. And that project includes people who can get pregnant that either have intellectual disabilities or that are autistic or are both. And that project, we've finished a bunch of qualitative surveys, qualitative work already about pregnancy experiences and pregnancy decisions. We are currently about to put out a large survey, and then the point is to use all that to create a decision aid that people who can get pregnant who are either autistic or have intellectual disabilities can use to make decisions about whether or not they want to get pregnant, what they would need to do to prepare for a pregnancy, or need to do to avoid a pregnancy.
Then we have Francesca Panteri raising a really nice question. If a research focuses on autistic children and or autistic non-speaking adults, who should be involved for a participatory research? Parents and caregivers, even if they are neurotypical?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And again, one without an easy answer, but one that's really important because it's the reality in many situations. I would say you have to have a mix. I think that caregivers of parents and caregivers of, let's say, children or people who cannot participate themselves bring a really important perspective, whether or not they themselves are autistic. However, they don't bring the only perspective. And I think that's where finding both parents and caregivers and also autistic adults who can participate, who can work together, is so important. Because there are going to be some things that an autistic person who can participate may actually have more in common with an autistic person who can't. And there are things where, again, the caregivers are going to understand more. I think about it in kind of how we can get the most insights from the most lived experience. I wouldn't do a project on let's say non-speaking people without some non-speaking people. And we've always had Mel Baggs, fortunately has passed away, was our first non-speaking community partner. And she was incredible, and she was one of the founders of our AASPIRE group. We have now Rachel Kripke-Ludwig, who is also incredible, non-speaker, uses a letterboard. It takes a lot to actually include them. because it takes so much for her to be able to participate. We have to wait. It takes extra work, but it's so important to do that. And then again, we have, for example, Shannon Della Rosa, whose son is non-speaking and wouldn't be able to participate even with all the accommodations that we give with for Rachel. And it's really important to have Shannon on our team. So I would say finding the people that are willing to listen to each other to be able to ultimately be as helpful as possible in creating research that's going to work for folks who might not be able to participate themselves.
In the context of a collaboration between academics and autistic community partners, does power sharing usually involve the sharing of financial resources with them
Yes.
as for the remunerating their labor within the project?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But again, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, and it's not that everybody gets the same. Again, it depends on the situation. If there is any funding, there should be funding for community partners. That's just a rule. I remember early on working with an academic researcher who just thought, oh, we can't do that, but they had funding for participants. Like, no, like if you have any funding, there should be funding for community partners. There are times where things are completely unfunded. And honestly, I've sometimes just tried to be creative. I recognize my power and privilege. I recognize that not everybody can do this. But when we first started out, we had no money. I worked a few extra clinics. I'm a doctor. I worked a few extra clinics for my university and told them that extra pay, instead of giving it to me, to put it in a little fund. And that fund funded my community partner participants, because it was easier for me to just work a few extra clinical shifts than to try to spend all this time to get, a few $1,000s to be able to pay my participants, my community partners. And that's how we did it at first. However, once you have funding, then you have to figure out how to use that funding equitably, and how to make it work. When we have co-investigators that are autistic, well, they get a co-investigator salary. When we have research assistants that are autistic, how they get a research assistant salary. My community project leads technically become research associates or something at the university, just so that I can pay them. And then we always give stipends to people who are coming to particular meetings or to doing a particular, if there's a lot of work that they're doing outside of meetings, we pay them. And part of our communication is always to note what's getting paid and how much they're getting paid for doing things.
Okay, I think we have time for the last two questions. So one is again from Rita. So Christina, do you have thoughts on the surveys for autism diagnostic assessments?
So I haven't personally been involved with surveys for autism diagnostic assessment, but doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions anyway. So I'll take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I do think that what's happened with autism is that we've defined autism and we've done our diagnostic assessments based off of what upsets adults about little boys, little white boys, American little white boys or English little white boys. And that isn't really what autism is. In the same way, I mean, I got a late diagnosis of ADHD because the way we diagnose ADHD is what upsets parents and teachers from poorly behaved little white boys. And that certainly didn't fit my experience. I think there's work right now trying to refine some of the existing instruments. There's also really good work about creating completely new instruments based off of the inner experience of autism, the same way that I'm not going to do an observational assessment to figure out if you're depressed. It's the inner experience of depression that matters. And I do think the inner experience is really important here. And this idea that somehow observation is more objective than inner experience doesn't necessarily make sense. Because again, if you think about it for depression, I can have a much better assessment if I'm asking the inner experience of if somebody's depressed than if I'm watching them and trying to figure out if they're depressed based off of how they behave. Again, this isn't my area. We've published in our journal, we've published some interesting papers around new diagnostic approaches, and I think it's an exciting field.
Okay, and the very last question. So if there is any other question, please write it down. So for now, the last question is, what an important speech. Thank Christina. Which of your suggestions are specific for participatory research with autistic people, and which of them could be used with other communities as well?
I tailored this talk because I was asked to speak about autism research. I put the word autism in a lot of things. I'm a participatory researcher, and I was doing participatory research with other communities for a decade before I ever even thought about autism. Almost everything I say actually could be applicable to other communities. What is special about autism, and special about is for any community, you have to think about that particular community's cultures and barriers and needs and strengths and what they bring to it. So there are some of the details I do differently with my projects with autistic people. I still have projects that have nothing to do with autism, that are CBPR projects that I work on. And community, you have to understand. I think without some of the things a little different with some city. In general, when we're talking about, Latino community, we're talking about both the parents and the children. What's different with autism is we can't make that assumption. That's very similar to working with the deaf community or the LGBTQ community. And I've often thought about how would I do a project with the LGBT community where the parents are not necessarily in the same marginalized status as a child. And I've gone that way. Things are just specific communication stuff. I'm just a lot more detail oriented in communications, and I have a lot more stuff in writing than I do with some other communities. But ultimately, almost everything I've said comes from a career's worth of doing participatory research with all sorts of different communities.
Okay, I think we don't have any other questions, so we really thank Christina. And
thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
And I can't wait. I'll be coming to see
Yes.
some of you at least
Exactly.
in Italy in
We are
June,
waiting
and
for
I'm
you.
super, super excited about it. We just actually did our plane tickets, so now it's like real.
Nice.
So looking forward to meeting some of you in person.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
So may I add something about, so Christina Nicolaidis will be a visiting professor at Sapienza University in June, if I'm correct. And we are thinking together with the Neuropeculiar, which is an autistic-led local grassroots organization, to run something, is still kind of up in the air in a way, but I mean, about autism and co-current mental health issues with the local service provider, public health service providers. So stay tuned. Also for the people that are attending this workshop, stay tuned if you're interested on these issues, because then we're gonna call out for interested people. Quindi mi autotraduco, voglio dire, Christina Nicolaidis sarà una visiting professor a Sapienza a giugno, e insieme a Neuropeculiar, che forse molti di voi conoscono, comunque un'associazione organizzata da persone autistiche in Italia, soprattutto basata in Italia. Faremo un progetto che riguarda autismo, età adulta e concorrenze con problemi di salute mentale insieme alle ASL di Roma e del Lazio. Quindi diciamo, se è un tema che vi interessa, guardate un po' quello che facciamo, perché poi cercheremo delle collaborazioni con persone che sono interessate a questo argomento. Poi ora è un po' tutto vago, però sappiate, autismo, salute mentale, età adulta, diciamo, giugno. Okay, so thank you again very much for joining us and sharing your excitement, expertise, and really, I mean, anyway, yeah. And then I also would like to thank Beatrice Baldi, who did amazing work in translating online on the chat. I hope that this works, this translation thing works, but in terms
Sorry,
of...
I speak so fast.
Yeah, I mean, they are going to summarize for sure. But... Quindi ringrazio Beatrice Baldi per il suo lavoro di traduzione, che è una gran fatica. Speriamo che sia accessibile. Non avevamo la possibilità di fare una traduzione, diciamo, simultanea a voce, però insomma speriamo che vada. La pausa, now we have
10
a break,
minuti,
10
facciamo...
minutes break.
Yes, so ci vediamo ai 23, ok? So 5 and 23. Okay, see you later. Bye.
Okay, so let me welcome all the panelists. This panel is about experiences of autism participatory research studies. And thank you very much to all the panelists for joining us. We have Ilse Scavarda, who's non-autistic and is from University of Torino. Martina Fusaro, who's non-autistic and from Sapienza University of Rome. Isabelle Flahaux, sorry about the pronunciation, I should have asked in advance, who's autistic and is part of LAVA, which is an organization from Belgium. Ilse Noens, non-autistic, University of Leuven, Belgium. Silke Lipinski, Autism Research Collaboration, AFK from Germany. Lorna Hamilton, non-autistic, York St. John University. Kathryn Lewis, autistic, York St. John University in the UK. And Ariel Schwartz, non-autistic, University of New Hampshire, USA. So I will ask the questions to them. I'm unprepared. So the way il modo in cui funziona il panel è che io chiedo una domanda alla volta ai panelist e poi loro rispondono una alla volta. So I will ask one question at a time to the panelists, and then you can reply. I'm not finding the questions. The panelists will reply one by one. Sorry about this. Ecco. So the first question is, what was the experimental question of your study? You can pick one autism participatory research study that you have in mind, and if you can share with us, what was the experimental question of your study?
Should I start? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we can proceed in a order. I don't know what.
As you want.
Yeah, go ahead. Start.
Okay. Okay, sorry, because I was the first one to be called, and so I was I presume that I was also the one to start the discussion. So my experimental question was which are the social implications of being of self-identifying as neurodivergent person, not only autistic but also ADHD in our case study, and how different different conceptions of ADHD, autism, and neurodiversity were interiorized by participants, and how they interiorized and resisted them. So I can speak later about the other aspects of our study. Thank you.
I go second. So I'm representing someone who has not really a long expertise on participatory research, but so I'm happy to share the first steps that I've been doing in this field. And so I'm going to share some thoughts about two experiences that we have with participatory research, but the topic that is in common with these two research is tactile perception. So how autistic adults perceive interpersonal touch.
So how can we do this? Either I call people
I would suggest that maybe we follow the order that's in the program. If everyone has that, we can maybe just follow that order. I can maybe share it again in the chat if that's useful for everyone.
Yes, thank you.
So while I do that, the next up is Isabelle.
I'm Isabelle. So I'm from LAVA. That's a Belgian organization that is led by autistic people and specializes in participatory research. And one thing that we are doing, which is at the core of the work that we do, we also participate with several universities, in particular with the University of Leuven. But our core work is reading sessions, and I will specifically talk about this in this panel because it's more unusual and I hope interesting. We are doing we have done so we invite researchers in our in online meetings where we have about a panel of a dozen autistic people who are interested in research. Many of them have a academic background, and some are researchers, and so we participate in that way in studies, and I will give a few examples that I will define. So one of them was working. We have really a wide range, but I will give, for instance, the recommendations on autism, sexuality, and gender diversity, which was a questionnaire to be asked to autistic people. The last reading session I will also mention was a big project in that is led in Belgium with several universities on language. We call Belgium Belgium and Language in Autism Study, if I'm not mistaken, and it's a collaboration of many universities, and we had some researchers come and present us their program and dialogue with us. So, well, I will stop to.
I think I was next in the program. So my name is Ilse Noens. I'm a professor in educational sciences at KU Leuven, University in Belgium. Participatory research is really at the core of our work. I think we try to have a participation at the heart of all of our research projects. Later, I will mainly talk about the Academic Collaborative Center of Autism, which is really a collaboration between autistic people, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners in Flanders. We work so that we co-define the priorities for the next call together with the autistic community. Together, we set a call for research projects. We select the projects together, and then we execute the projects together. And I will talk you through a bit of that later in this panel. Some of the projects that we are currently working on are on suicide prevention, on autism-friendly detention in jails, and specific sorts of therapy like EMDR or acceptance and commitment therapy, and how to improve those for autistic people, just as to give you some examples.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Silke Lipinski. I'm from Germany. I work in Berlin. And since 2007, the Autism Research Collaboration is a group of autistic adults that collaborate with autism researchers. Clearly, the autistic adults are in the majority. There's some academics, some autism researchers that are autistic, just like myself in the group, but we also do have people who are clearly non-academics. And ever since, it's been the autistic participants of the group that decided on the topics which should be researched next. I want to talk about a study that the idea came up in 2013, which is quite a long time ago. And I have to remind that back then, the James Lind Alliance Top 10 for Autism haven't been published yet. But at that time, we chose the topic of access to psychotherapeutical support, outpatient support for adults. And later on, we were quite fond of that, that it did prove that it is good to ask the people, even if you just have a smaller group, about the topics which seem relevant, because it has been shown that this is a very relevant topic for a large group. We did conduct 2 studies. First, we asked autistic participants about their access experiences. And from that, extruding what their experiences was, we also asked outpatient psychotherapists and tried to find a pattern which gave us some anchor points on how to change the health system in Germany with this knowledge.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lorna Hamilton. I'm an associate professor in developmental psychology at York St John University. I'm co-presenting a study today with Kathryn, and Kathryn is going to mainly talk through the participatory nature of the study, but I'll just introduce it for this question. So I've been working with autistic children in schools for a number of years now, and trying to find increasingly participatory ways to work with autistic and multiply neurodivergent children to foreground their own experiences in the mainstream school system in the UK. Unfortunately, we know that the statistics on outcomes for autistic children in schooling are really not great. So there's increasing data around disproportionate exclusion levels, high levels of school distress, low levels of happiness in school, but the children's voice is really missing from the literature. So we've been trying to find ways in which we can not only foreground first-person perspectives, but work with the young people and their families in order to design and analyse these studies and disseminate the findings. So we're going to talk about an ongoing longitudinal study that Kathryn is leading as part of her PhD. We're working with a small number of autistic and multiply neurodivergent children over 2 years. So from the last year of primary school and then into the first 2 years of secondary school or high school. And again, we know that high school environments can be particularly challenging for autistic children because of high levels of sensory input and social challenges and so on. So in terms of a research question, we're trying to address on a very individual level, how is the transition into high school, secondary school experienced by these children, and what are the factors that both enable or disable a successful transition into mainstream education at secondary level. And I'll pass over to Kathryn for the remainder of the questions.
Yeah, as Lorna said, I'll only just briefly introduce myself now because she's already answered the question. But yeah, I'm a PhD student at York St John University. I'm an autistic researcher, and I'm looking forward to talking more about the participatory nature of our project.
I'm Ariel Schwartz. I'm at the University of New Hampshire in the United States. I do participatory research with people with both intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that includes people with autism. I'm not specifically an autism researcher. And one of the studies, though, that I'll highlight today is I'll highlight it specifically because it was very much driven by some of the autistic co-researchers on my team, was looking at the impacts of mental health at work, and also looking at accommodations that supported people with intellectual and developmental disabilities while they were at work to cope with their mental health in the workplace.
If I'm correct, we are done, right?
Yeah, second question.
Okay, thank you. This organization is a mess. Okay. The second question is, in what way or in what ways was your research participatory? And we follow the same order. If Beatrice could repaste the order, at least for me.
Yes, okay, thank you. So, yes, I introduced myself because I didn't do it before. I'm Alice Scavarda, and I'm a researcher at the University of Torino. I am discussing today with you my latest research, which is definitely participatory because we have, and because I have an experience of participatory research studies, but this is the more interesting and more challenging experience for me, because of course I'm not autistic, but I'm doing the research as a sort of how can I say, as a very marginal part of the research team, because the research is led by two researchers who are both one autistic and the other one is ADHD. So I'm only supporting them, and they are designing the study, and they are also collecting all the data using creative methods, and also recruiting people through social media. So it's something which is very similar to what, for example, also Liz Pellicano suggested at the beginning of this day. So it's participatory because the leading researchers are them, and myself and another colleague are simply how can I say, assisting them if they need some help, or if they need also they need a support in sharing different points of view and different perspectives. If you want an outsider point of view on some topics, on some specific topics, because of course they have also an emotional involvement in the topic, because one of them particularly has been recently diagnosed, and so it's a sort of also autoethnographic work, because we are combining their experience, their own experience, and the experience of other people. So it's an amazing experience for me, because I'm learning a lot from them, and also from the other participants, of course. And but I will discuss all the difficulties and also the strategies we use to face them later.
Okay, and for us, so yeah, I didn't mention. So I'm referring to research in psychology, neuroscience, social neuroscience, and we are a group who is working in Rome at La Sapienza and CNR. So the first experience that we had was a really low level of participatory research. So the group was composed by non-autistic researchers, and we conducted this online survey investigating how a social context. So, for example, an intimate relationship, an intimate meeting or a friendly meeting shape the experience of an interpersonal touch. So we compare a group of autistic adults trying to balance the gender of the participants, and we compare it with a non-autistic group. And in this first experience, we asked to a group of consultants. So there were 4 autistic consultants to read our paper before we submitted it, and we asked for revisions. So they provide us comments, and then we modify the text accordingly, and then we submit it. So this was the first low-level research that we conducted. And then, we started to work a bit more because it happened that during that year, we started also to work in the group of participatory research with many autistic researchers, non-autistic researchers, and non-autistic non-researchers. And so we started this project that, again, investigating interpersonal touch. So we started having more or less already the project idea, but we involved consultants. We selected 2 autistic researchers and 2 autistic non-researchers. And we consulted them in developing the paradigm, selecting the stimuli, and we are still working on it. But yeah, the idea is to work with them in creating the scenario that we are going to use for the study, and then they will be involved in all the other steps. So from working on the consent form, on the questionnaire to make them more accessible, and then interpreting the results, trying the experiments first, and interpreting the results, and working on the draft of the manuscript, and so
on. Yes, so our in what way is our research participatory? So I talked about our reading sessions. Actually, they are a bit old, have the same format, where we have a dozen autistic people who first choose the research. We usually a work in progress, research proposal. It can be some research questions, interview formulation questionnaires, protocols, and on a variety of subject of autism research. So we read the proposal, we read the article or the study that we get in advance. We make remarks and questions during the sessions, and then we submit conclusions to them. Because it's a group of autistic people who have a variety of backgrounds. Some are researchers, but some are not, but some are psychologists, linguists, philosophers, healthcare providers, or working in healthcare, or therapists, and some are just people who are really interested in autism research. It is a variety of perspective that the researcher will have on their question, but with this particularity of being autistic. And this is happening actually in not in a university, but in our space, like in autistic space. We control the parameters of this space. We choose the researchers and the subject. And yeah, that's the way it is participative, in a way that we can also have the balance of power is not entirely against us here. We are, it is our space. And at the same time, we have one foot in academia. We still have researchers among us, and we know the language of research, which is useful to talk to researchers. And yes, so this is the way we do participatory research. One of the ways, and this is one way where we have our own autistic space, and we can exchange at that level.
Okay, thank you, Isabelle. I'll talk a little bit about how we do participatory research in the Academic Collaborative Center for Autism. As I said before, together with autistic people from diverse stakeholder organizations, such as LAVA, where Isabelle is from, but also the Flemish Autism Association, we determine the research priorities. And then we have a call for projects. We choose the projects together. And that being said, our research team is neurodiverse, so the team in itself, but then throughout the whole process, we also collaborate with autistic people, both within and outside of our within and outside of our own team. How do we do so? So as said, by setting the priorities together, so setting the research agenda together, by selecting the projects together, by developing the design of the study, including the measures. For example, with the suicide prevention study, we co-developed the interview guide, the safety measures, the backup plan for getting back to people after the interview. Data collection was done together with autistic people. We analyzed the data together, we interpreted the data together, and then at the end we discuss how to report and how to disseminate the findings. And we always make sure that we don't only disseminate via academic outlets like academic papers, but also with lots of visuals. For example, we disseminate all of our findings through infographics via the stakeholder organizations. We do that, as I said, by collaborating closely with stakeholder organizations, and the main stakeholder organization we're collaborating with is LAVA, where Isabelle just presented about. Per project, we have a sort of a steering committee, including autistic individuals and their and other people in their environment, if that's relevant. So, for example, for a study with minimally verbal individuals, we may also include parents or brothers or sisters into the team. And maybe also important is that we always make sure to pay the work that's being done. So we don't expect people to be volunteers on the project. We budget for the participatory aspects of the work, and we pay people or the stakeholder organizations we're working with for the work that they're doing in the collaboration with us. So some of a little bit of the gist of the work.
Yeah, I could just repeat what Ilse just said, that it's important in every step of a research cycle to work together, and we do that too. But I want to approach the question a little bit differently, because since we started the group in 2007, the term participatory research wasn't even out there yet. So we did it just because it felt natural to everyone that researchers on a topic in a field which includes human beings should be in touch with these people to learn from each other, and to not be just doing research on an abstract topic to them. So that's why I'd like to say we're not a project, we are a working group. We are a group of people that meet in their spare time We've never got any funding, so that might change at some point, but that also helped with the power dynamics, definitely. Actually, it is bringing together the strengths everyone has. Each individual brings their own knowledge, what can be included in this research process, and the researchers a lot of times bring in knowledge about how to do sound research. But that's just one knowledge type of all the knowledge types that are brought in. That's how we fit everything together, not even distinguishing that much between who does what. We just work together. Now we do know there's a term for this, and that there's all kinds of categories that are fulfilled, which is nice. One that I have not heard yet is emancipation. That's something I associate very much with participatory health research, that it is very much also about emancipation of the groups working together. And so we try to learn from each other a lot. Our non-autistic members try to be a little bit more emancipated in neurodiverse dialogues. And also we learn and have been growing into the science language and processes, and go and to present our results together and feel more emancipated to have a stronghold also in the whole non-autistic science discourse, to be more knowledgeable and therefore be able to discuss more in the science community. So that's something I find important, that there's also an emancipatory process.
Okay, so as Lorna said, our research was with autism, or is with, I should say, it's ongoing, autistic young people, and being participatory and being accessible has kind of been a key thread throughout our research. So throughout the whole research process, it's been really important to involve the young people and their families, and to consult with them through allowing kind of multiple ways of engaging with the research. And in doing so, to kind of foreground the voices and the individual experiences of each young person and their own journey through the school system in the UK. So we started with that before the point of any data collection. So prior to any data being collected, we had calls firstly with parent or carer of each young person. And that was really because our participants were quite young at the start of the study. We wanted to get some information about their preferences, communication preferences and communication style, as well as their likes and dislikes and the ways that we could engage and connect with them, and any ways that we might be able to tell that they were either engaged with the research or that they were disengaging. And I think that's really important with the power, the concept of power. The young person, particularly coming from a school environment, might not be able to tell us that they don't want to engage with the research, or that they're not enjoying the question, or that they're finding it stressful. So it's good to have an idea of what those kind of signs might be. We also had a session before any data was collected with each child, either at school or at home. And we kind of built on the information we had from the parent or carer in talking alongside each other. So we completed activities alongside each other where we shared our own likes and dislikes, and learned what their likes and dislikes were. So we talked about things like their family and our families, and the kind of things that we enjoyed or didn't enjoy. And that helped right at the start of the project to build this kind of mutual respect and familiarity with each other, to reduce any uncertainty then going into the research, and to build initial rapport with the participants. We also sent in advance an easy read outline of the study with images accompanying it, to make sure that all the young people and their families understood what the study was as much as they were able to do so. And we discussed that in person as well, and gave the opportunity to ask questions and to find out more about what the research would involve. So that's all before any data was collected. And then when we did collect data, we did that in a way where we offered multiple means of engaging with the research. So that included things like creative methods, so offering the opportunity to maybe draw pictures in response to questions, or to create comic book stories of their school day. We also offered discursive or conversation-based activities. For example, we had a card sort exercise where participants rated aspects of their school day from 1 to 5 stars. And we had some embodied or movement-based methods that we could offer as well. So things like walk and talk, which is where you walk around the school building, for example, and ask them to talk about the aspects of school that they enjoy or don't enjoy. And being able to offer those wide range of methods really meant that for each participant, we could find a way that they could engage with the research in a way that was meaningful to them, rather than kind of imposing a way of engaging with research onto them. We also, I suppose, other participatory ways, in terms of the understanding of power dynamics, we offered cards to each participant so they could choose to stop or to pause the data collection sessions at any time. We were really aware of the fact that, again, being in a school environment, they might not feel able to say that to us. So having those cards provided another opportunity to be able to communicate those concerns. And then in terms of output, all the participants had the opportunity to be involved in creating some animations about the school experience that were used, that offered to to teachers or parents or other students, and to tell them about what it's like to move from primary to secondary school. So they met with the animator and they discussed what they would like to have in those animations. And then we haven't done the analysis aspect of the study yet, but the plan is to involve the participants to some level in the analysis of the data as well. So that's kind of a broad overview of the participatory nature of our research.
So for our work with young adults with a range of intellectual and developmental disabilities, but including autism, we identified this topic of mental health impacts in the workplace and accommodations, largely driven by kind of anecdotal experiences, but then ultimately I was the one who led kind of the development of the research question based on what I'd been hearing from folks. But from then on, it was highly participatory, even though it might not have been at its inception for this particular project. So some things that we did that were participatory together were deciding on questions to ask in interviews, questions to ask on surveys, making the response scale for the survey, which I'll talk about in the next question, and then co-conducting all data collection together and having the members be part of the interviews, leading the interviews. I was really just there for backup and support as needed. And then working together to analyze both the qualitative and the quantitative data. And so we kind of undertook parallel processes where we prioritized the analysis that the team was doing, but I also concurrently did an analysis, like a thematic analysis with a research assistant. And of course there was convergence, but the team had insights that we didn't, as expected. And so we used a number of methods to make that analysis accessible. But one of them was taking line by line data and putting each on a note card. I've done this on paper note cards. I've also done it electronic note cards, and having those sorted into main ideas and sorting and resorting and a lot of drawing and active movement of the data, as opposed to just handing somebody a transcript. And then with quantitative data using a lot of colorful graphs. And so then we collaborated to write an academic paper, and also the group said that what they wanted to do to disseminate the information was to be on a podcast, because they had been on some podcasts before for other research projects. They had also made videos, they'd also made some plain language dissemination products, but they really enjoyed the podcast. So they shared the information both in academic publications and in a podcast.
So thank you very much. And then the third question is that the panelists had the questions in advance. What was the added value of being participatory?
Well, in my experience, generally speaking, the added value of being participatory is that as a non-autistic researcher, you can avoid all the, how can I say, the ableism, which is somehow interiorized in ourselves, and we are not aware of them, of these conceptions or practices. So in my first experience, which was related to my PhD thesis, it was really important to involve participants, because also in how I designed my research study, and which were the concepts that I used, for example, related to autism, and in that case, it was Down syndrome, because I was not aware of my preconceptions and on my scientific conceptions of these conditions. In the last experience, which is totally conducted by neurodivergent researchers, I think that the added value of being them leading the research was that they absolutely define all the research design, but also how can I say, they also think about different kinds of methods to develop, to study this very sensitive topic, which is of course the implications and the social implications of being of self-identifying as a neurodivergent person. And also, if you want, also in the research question is affected by this participatory nature of the study, because for example, we are not interested in recruiting people who are diagnosed with, for example, autism or ADHD, but with people who self-identify as neurodivergent, autistic, or ADHD, or so. We really tried to avoid all these kind of medical concepts and labels, and also medical imperialism, and try to delve into the personal experience and the personal and also the personal language, the personal meanings that these people attach to this concept, for example, of autism or ADHD. And in doing so, they think about the idea of ask participants to produce an artifact, and the artifact that they want. It could be a photo or a collage, or also a comic, or also an object, of course, or a visual installation that for them represents autism and ADHD, because they are the two conditions which are currently focusing on. And I think that also this idea of giving participants this kind of freedom of producing also what they want, and also expressing with their with the channel of communication they prefer, of course. It's an added value of being participatory, because I always use creative methods in my research studies, because I think they are absolutely inclusive in this way. But I didn't get the point to this to ask participants to do what do you want, because somehow as a researcher I have this kind of a very strict mind, and I said, oh, no, I had to give them some hints to ask them, for example, to make a photo or make a collage. And in this experience, and I think it's very interesting also which kind of products we are collecting. Participants are completely free of doing what they want. And I'm persuaded that this is also one of the ways in doing participatory research. Also, not to really be flexible in how you also collect data, and on how you involve participants in your research studies. Thank you.
Okay, and for me, so first of all, which was not granted for me, at least, was to learn how to use language, so appropriate language. And so this is something that was really important in the beginning. I still make mistakes, but at least I'm more aware about it. And so this was really important for me. And then, so in the first experience that we had, we really realized that a lot of things that we put in our work, which was not, let's say, we did not consult autistic consultants for developing this work. So we took for granted that for example, the scenario that we developed were the same for autistic and non-autistic. So, for example, we had something that for us was a friendly interaction, but then we realized, thanks to participatory research, that we were considering friendly interaction for neurotypical. So it was not something shared with the autistic group. So their suggestion was to in that particular experience was to specify that, for example, that situation was validated for non-autistic participants. And then we also had prejudice, probably, as Alicia was saying. So we learned actually also that something that we considered typical for autistic individuals, actually it was not. And so for the second studies that we conducted, I really appreciate that we listened to narrative reports of autistic consultants talking about their experience. For example, we study touch, so they reported their experiences regarding touch and in general about sensory modalities. So we really learned a lot, and even we learned something that maybe we cannot put in the current study, but that gave us idea to develop future studies. And in our specific situation, we have two autistic consultants that are not researchers, and two that are autistic researchers. So it was really an added value for us to have on board someone that doesn't have a researcher mind, so that can speak without the limits that we have as a researcher. And yeah, I mean, I'm really enjoying it. So yeah.
So for us, there was the value, added value. Well, it is. We can ask that question. Who is it? For who is it? Is there added value? I think there are for the researchers, for the autistic people who participate, and maybe for the research itself. Concerning the researchers, well, we will bring them an autistic point of view. And hopefully this goes beyond just giving some sort of stamp of approval by autistic groups. We have a variety of perspectives, and well, we have we can. I think often when we say our point of view, and we see many different people who say the same thing, who have this autistic perspective that they don't have when they are not autistic, seeing a group saying it in different ways is more carries more weight than just one person, I guess. And we have variety of experience, and yeah, it can be whether about the language that is used in a study, about sensory aspects that they overlook, about the question of late diagnosis that sometimes they don't take into account, like when it is about studies on children. Yes, and also the fact that we are autistic, we tend to speak rather clearly, maybe sometimes bluntly, but we are explicit about what we mean to say. And for us, autistic people, it has also added value. We want to change something about autism research, if we want it to go more in the way that would serve autistic people, we have to be there to make our voices heard, and not only as professionals, but as amateurs and volunteers and part of a community. And for many of us, autistic research autism research is an important topic, and sometimes it does not always go in the direction of the well-being of autistic people. So we think it's important that we speak here and that we are heard. And also, as I said before, it is an autistic space. It is a place which is ours, and this brings added value to us, where we are not lost in some as a minority or token autistic person in a big institution. This is our space, and it is also this work. I believe we are not a peer support group in any way, but this work of discussing autistic research came from a real interest and need to understand ourselves, and it is a way that we can understand ourselves and our issues and limitation, and also a way that we can be heard, which is really important. And that's really also yeah, I think we are the person the research is about. We believe we can give valuable feedback, and it is important for us that we can have this collaboration, that our voice is heard, that we understand that our voice carries weight, and that even although there is a significant balance of power which remains there is also ways in which we are seen as equal when we have this good collaboration with the researchers, and it is important.
As to add to that, Isabelle, in our joint collaboration, what was in it for me as a researcher, I think it made our research way more relevant to the lives of autistic people, way more impactful. I also think that the research is better in that it's more valid. I think it also, as Isabelle just said, it also empowers neurodivergent people, and it changes the power dynamics. And if you've been going through these cycles of participatory research time after time, I've seen some sort of mutual trust building, and thus a sort of shared community between autistic and non-autistic researchers. And to me, that's been a huge added value to the work that I've been doing over the last years.
My answer is pretty simple. It is just that nobody would have done this research or asked this research question or conduct any of this question and how the access to psychotherapy is actually. It just would not have happened. And I think 2 more points. people with lived experience do know which questions actually to ask in a survey about access difficulties. If at least the non-autistic researchers told us they would not have asked these kind of questions, like what makes it difficult for you, and then ask about telephone or email communication. You just would not have gotten this idea. And we were able to bring something from what almost every autistic person knows into a format that science actually respects, which is data. By conducting a large quantitative study, which shows there is an access problem with the communication style to initiate contact to service providers. And by that, it was a very meaningful research idea from the autistic participants, because later on we were able to bring this forward in the German version of the NICE guidelines. It's called S3 guidelines. And there, finally, we were able to say, look, there's data. Now you can, it's not just us telling this, and you cannot push us away with, no, okay, whatever, you're telling your own story. But we have quantitative data on this. That is a problem for many. And again, the participatory type of research was able to generate actually real proof for this problem, because the autistic community in Germany participated in this survey in larger numbers than ever before in any scientific survey on autism. And that was because they knew it was from autistic people for autistic people, and it was meaningful to them. And I think that's what science should, at least most of the time, be able to make check marks. Is it meaningful? Is it actually, do you have people answering your questions because they think it's relevant to give input? And I think that's why we need to have collaborations and teamwork and participatory projects.
I think with working with autistic children, autistic young people in particular, there's a lot of research in schools that either focuses on parent or carer accounts, or does take both accounts, but then kind of the quotes of the parents are kind of amplified, and you lose the voice of the children who are actually experiencing school at the moment and know what it's like. So by working in a participatory way, we can reposition those children as being the experts of that current experience and of being the people who know what it's like. I mean, obviously I went through school as an undiagnosed autistic pupil, but I don't know what it's like to be in school now as an autistic pupil. So I also don't have that first person experience. So the value of being participatory is being able to give those children that voice and to be able to amplify that insider perspective. I think that was the way that we did that through the creative methods helped to obviously allow choice and to allow a range of participants to engage with the data. So, for example, someone who might struggle to communicate verbally, we could use those methods to be able to connect in different ways. Sorry. Yeah, so I think just in terms of being able to, as everyone said, challenge those power hierarchies that particularly young people who are in school experience all the time, by being able to offer different choices and by being able to let those young people lead the conversation or have some kind of way of structuring the conversation is really helpful. Lorna, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that, you know, we've been trying to do some of the amplification of first person autistic child voice in various studies, but using more traditional research methods, which are, you know, the methods from the literature, and actually taking the time to work with the young person and their family and understand what for them is going to allow meaningful participation has just yielded much richer data. It's just given us much better data to work with and insights that I think we wouldn't have got by using the same method for every child, or, you know, insisting on standardization. So I think it just means you have yeah, a much better study at the end of the process.
So I think there's so many ways in which they're added value, but that other people have already touched on. So I'll just highlight two examples. So one is thinking about doing data collection and having the members of our team really lead the interviews. They're able to develop rapport in a way I can't. They have follow-up questions that I would never think to ask because of their lived experiences. And so it just leads to more valid data. It leads to a more authentic, engaging data collection experience for everyone involved. And I guess the question was raised, what do the autistic researchers get out of it? The people who I've worked with over the years talk about it in so many ways, but they're proud to make an impact. They like learning new skills. They have leveraged their research experiences into jobs and new career directions. And so it's giving an opportunity for folks to pursue career paths or opportunities or make friends that maybe they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. And then the other example that I'd like to share is in this specific study, I thought we were just going to do interviews. The team said, no, we should do a survey. I said, okay, interesting. And so they wanted to have a survey about the ways that mental health impacted folks in the workplace and accommodations they had. And I thought, well, we can just get that from an interview. And they said, no, we need a survey. So I said, okay. And so we started developing the survey questions. And they really led that. And then I said, okay, we have to figure out a response scale and start talking to them about what a response scale is, what those look like. And they didn't like anything that I had that I thought was really grounded in good scientific evidence of how you make a good response scale. And I had a lot of experience in making accessible response scales. And they said, oh no, it's sure we understand it, but it's no good. It's not going to help actually answer the question we have. So they developed a response scale that I would have never dreamt of. I was very nervous about using. I thought, oh, I don't think we're going to get good data. And the data and information that we got from this survey was really fascinating and drove the primary findings, interesting findings from the study that never in a million years would we have had if we had just made a survey the way that I had always made a survey, or had we not had the survey at all, but they had felt like it was important. So just a great example of how I think it takes a lot of, it can be hard to say, I went to school, I learned these things, this is how research is supposed to proceed. I have a grant funding this work and I need to deliver, and to just say, I'm going to trust the team. That can be hard, whoever your team members are, regardless of disability. And so having trust in the team to lead the way. So very grateful for partnerships. I could share 1,000 examples like that, but I think that's a good one.
So thank you again. And the last question that we asked in advance, and then I would, because we are running, not very late, but give space to the participants to ask questions. So please also consider writing your questions in the chat. The last question is, what difficulties did you face regarding participation, the participatory side of the projects, and how did you address them?
Okay. Well, I think that the main difficulties I faced during my research, my participatory research experiences, and particularly on the latest one, during the latest one, is to find a balance between the insider and outsider point of view, or to try to combine different perspectives. Because I think that one of the main added value of participatory research is the thing that you can really share different points of view also on a single topic, on a single phenomenon. And the fact that autistic and non-autistic researchers are working together is really enriching, because you can also, deconstruct your own point of view by confronting it with other people which have other points of view. But it's not that difficult to find a negotiation between these different perspectives. Of course, the perspectives somehow are very similar, and on most of the topics, we were absolutely in line on the same page because we share also the perspective, which was the neurodiversity paradigm and the social model of disability. But sometimes there are these kind of differences which are difficult to manage and to balance. Also in terms of mainly not only methodologically speaking, but also ethically speaking. And as far as the second aspect is concerned, so ethical aspects of the research, this was my main methodological challenge. So how to balance the different points of view and also the different positionalities in the research field, because of course I am a non-autistic researcher who is studying autism, and I'm a woman, and I'm a mother, of course, and this kind of characteristics, of course, impact also my point of view, and I'm aware of it. But at the same time, it's not that easy to confront and to share and to find a negotiation, because as Liz Pellicano said, participatory research is a result of a collaboration. But as you know, collaboration is made up of negotiations, of agreements, but also of tensions, of course, sometimes. And so it's not that easy to manage these tensions. In this specific case, I faced this challenge by trying to be guided by my co-researchers, and also because both of them are also women, and so we've tried to find also sort of a similar point of view in terms of the similar oppression we faced in our everyday life, because as women, as precarious researchers, we find this kind of points of view which were not so different also in terms of experiences, of course. So this was our way to manage the slight, of course, differences in points of view during the designing of the research and also the recruiting phase. As far as the ethical aspects are concerned, I think that one of the main challenge of participatory research is how to value the participants' contribution to the research. Not, of course, in this case, not of the researchers, the co-researchers, because they are absolutely the main authors, for example, of publications, and they are the people who are, for example, contacting also participants. But I mean, the contribution and the involvement of the other participants in our case, and how to give really authentically voice to them. And to, in my view, one of the ways to acknowledge also the authorship of the artifacts they produce. And this can be controversial, I know, but I think that we don't need to have this kind of very strict approach to privacy issues, for example, of course, when we are doing participatory research, because one way to give voice to participants is also to acknowledge their identity and their contribution, of course, if they want. I just don't want to force things, and I don't know that it's also controversial, because of course these artifacts like photos or videos or poetry or sculptures will last in time, and so it's also a controversial issue, because maybe they wouldn't they won't be acknowledged maybe in 10 years. So of course there are many aspects that we need to consider, but I think that one of the main issues is not to have how can I say a sort of an approach which is to extract value from participants, but really to to try to acknowledge and to recognize their contribution to the research, and also in terms of publication authorship, or to as giving visible their contribution to the research. Because if not, I think that it's not authentically participatory, because of course we as researchers, we have also we can take profit of the fruits of our research. So I think that the issue of the outcome of the research and how this can be beneficial also for participants is a very important point of view. And we need to maybe think about different things of dissemination of our results, so different ways, different forms, for example, also an exhibition. Sorry.
I will be short. So the first problem for us, and I think Eleonora and Giovanni are two testifiers of this, and that we are not good with deadlines. So the first problem that we face is that we as non-autistic researchers, we don't respect deadlines that we give. So we always try to apologize, but there is no apology said. So we are still trying to improve this thing from our side.
No problem.
No, but I mean, anyway, it is. So, and it's also important for us to respect them. So this is something that we really need to improve. And then, since I don't know if it's a matter of not being that expert on this, but something that we are facing, for example, in building and constructing together this new experiment, is to integrate into an experimental paradigm all the suggestions that we receive. So sometimes we find difficulties in doing so because we have some limits, we have some constraints. For example, the time that a participant can spend in doing an experimental studies, and as in our case. So sometimes we really struggle in how to be able to take all the suggestions into considerations. And related to this, we also, I think that one of the problem we are facing, for example, is then when it's something easy to implement, of course we implement it really immediately. But when it's something that go against our principle for the experimental paradigm, we really think about it. So it's something that we need to find a way, because sometimes, for example, we receive the feedback from the consultants, and we say, yeah, maybe these 4 consultants think like this, because we realize that it's something difficult to implement. So we don't implement it, and we, as a strategy to justify ourselves, we say, yeah, but maybe other participants will not think the same as them. So, for example, we are considering to develop surveys to, for example, related to something that we cannot implement easily in the paradigm. So to send surveys to more consultants, autistic consultants, to receive also their feedback, and then again trying to find a way to integrate in a paradigm. So this is our big issue at the moment.
Yes, and for us, what some of the difficulties that we have been facing, for one is that we don't really follow up in those reading sessions. Beyond, we give a summary of our conclusion and notes and remarks to the researchers, but we don't follow up really beyond that. We get some feedback occasionally, but on the whole, we are not involved in the whole process of the research. So we don't really know the final impact. We hope we contribute, but we don't know. We don't want to be just give a sort of stamp of approval and be just oh yes, we have passed or researched through some autistic people and it has been approved by them. Well, we don't really have a system for that so far, but mostly in practical, I think people are hear what we say. And well, one of there's also the question of representativeness. We are one voice of the autistic community. We don't claim to represent the whole autistic community or anybody else than ourselves, actually. We cannot do that, but and we are just one type of autistic people who have some interest in research and some background in it sometimes. So, but this comes up, and I think one of the big issues is really I mentioned balance of power, but really the finance question is important, the money question. And it was interesting to note when I heard the first people in this workshop, it was first not mentioned and somebody asked a question. Sometimes it's for the researchers tend to forget about this. This is really an important question. And sometimes people do notice that, in this particular workshop, indeed, and Ilse mentioned that too. This is a very important question. We are volunteers. We don't get paid at all, and some of us get paid, as Ilse said, when we collaborate with the university. Sometimes we manage to pay our own volunteers a small compensation, but we have no structural funding. We have more and more demands. We have many volunteers, and so it's a lot of work to organize that. It's a lot of administrative work, and several of us are on the edge of burnout. But it is an important question, because if you want to go beyond having this or that individual person who will intervene in participatory studies, there has to be some funding for some people at some point, and for associations like ours, where we can being a group of autistic people also changes the relationship as opposed to being one or two individual. And for this, there needs to be some funding. And yes, so this is, sometimes we feel some imbalance. We often notice we are expected to. There's a lot of demand for us to come to also do other things and those specific sessions, but people really expect us to not be paid and to. Right, it changes also the relationship with researchers who are indeed paid, who are so functioning in a different way. And yes, yes, also sometimes the university, being outside of university, creates some sort of imbalance. It's not always easy to be in the loop or to be completely part of it by definition, but for this we have it's interesting that what we do, we have our own space, even if it's a very small association. And so yeah, that's about the difficulties that we have. Yes, that's true.
Following up on that, I also wrote down funding as point number one. What I observe is that here in Belgium, at least, I see that it's still way easier to find funding for more classical biomedical research in comparison to participatory social model research. So that's really something to battle. Our Academic Collaborative Center for Autism is actually funded. That was, I think, here in Belgium, the first participatory project that was funded. It's funded by the Flemish government, but still with very small funds. And well, how do we tackle this? By talking to lots of people who can influence the funding, but that will really take time to change those mechanisms. So yeah, for me, that's really challenge number one. The second one I wrote down has been discussed already, so I'll be a little bit brief on that. Indeed, combining perspectives and dealing with diversity and input may be challenging from time to time. I think you can't escape making choices from time. You can never follow all of the advice that you get, or you can never include all of the voices, although, of course, we will try. But if you have to make choices, I think it's very important to be transparent about the choices that you're making and to feedback why you do what you do. And that takes time and that takes effort. But I think it's really important to do so in order to build those trusting relations that I was talking about earlier. So yeah, dare to make choices, but be explicit about the choices you make, and be creative in trying to include different voices by including all different ways of dealing with the input. And I've heard many creative ways already during earlier interventions in this panel, so thank you for that. Yeah, I think I'll leave it here.
I kind of would like to raise our difficulties in a similar direction as Isabelle did. A lot of it is a resource problem, but it's not merely a money resource problem. If we would be paid, it wouldn't change that much regarding how exhausted a lot of us are most of the time anyways with daily life. And there's not as many resources for, like spare time activities anyways, let alone then more challenging activities like going to a scientific conference or so on. So I think money is one resource, that's fine, but none of us wants to change their profession and be a paid person. We would like to continue in a way that we can work. But also society does pose exactly the same question, like Liz and Christina posed in their talks. There's us as a group, we have constantly people being sick, being burned out, being overwhelmed, and having difficulties with a job or so on, which needs to be taken care of first before our participatory projects come. So we have a very long time span. We are very slow, and that doesn't fit into the resource context. That would not fit in nowadays funding schemes, which are very limited time schedules. You have to be done by that time. So I think there's another point where things just don't fit or match yet well. We have a lot of PhD students and that would like to work with us. We cannot accommodate all the requests, which is sometimes something I find really sad. But something that is I almost have to say annoying to us is that every time somebody would like to work with us, we have to train them again and again and again. I mean, we have to train every new person like how to do participatory research and how to work with us. And that is a bit annoying because there is a lot of materials out there. There is so many nice trainings out there. And every time there's this mindset of, we'll just go there and we can do it. I just like, who in science would be, I mean, so keen to say like, oh, there's a new method, I haven't done it, I'm just going to do it anyways. Everyone would go and participate in a training or do something before you just go and meet your actually group members and start a project. And I think that's a challenge yet. We want people to come without a big barrier to do participatory research, but at the same time, we cannot just train all the other people all the time. There should be it's an approach, it's a method. We should make sure that people come with prior knowledge, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel with a single person over and over again. So I think that's something that's also very inefficient yet in the scientific system. And the last problem we actually have is the academic community in Germany is there's different researchers, all kinds, but a lot are not too open. And they raise arguments against outcomes that have been outcomes of participatory studies, and they raise scientific opposition against this, but they don't hold true. Those arguments are just like fake scientific. And I asked the question, Liz, earlier on, I don't know how to oppose them or how to tell them, like, you're not being logical. You're like, actually, you're trying to find scientific arguments, which are worse than, like maybe some flaws we have in our studies. So, so looking at it from the opposite way, like what is the problem with the participation is like some don't let us participate in the discourse or somehow might be afraid or so on. So to conclude, and my last words are, I would like to invite researchers that are a little bit afraid or not in touch yet with participatory research, and invite them to do participatory research. Like we can do it with them as a group, and then find out what are the barriers and maybe the hidden fears and underlying. So maybe a nice qualitative project or so, just to really turn around the point of view also and do studies about them and not only about us. Thank you.
I think for us, one of the difficulties that we encounter is the location of the research. So we've been doing most data collection sessions in schools. I think that works in a lot of ways because it is the environment that we're talking about. So it's immediate. So the recollection is improved by that. But that does come with some challenges. So schools can be very difficult to access because they are very busy and they have lots of different people wanting to come in all the time. So building those kind of regular relationships and being able to go in is one challenge. Schools are also the space available in the school that's appropriate. We can't control that. So because of that, there can be kind of sounds that are out of our control and other environmental factors that might make participating more challenging. So that can make things really difficult. I think also for me as a neurodivergent researcher, I think what you were just saying about kind of the energy that's required to participate in research or to lead research can be really challenging, particularly for me kind of going into schools that were a difficult experience for me when I was younger. I have to allow for that, the fact that it is going to take more of my energy to do each data collection session. So some of that is going to take longer. But then also being able to put that to one side and listen to the account that the young person is giving me that might be different to my own account and my own experience. So that can definitely be a challenge, and that's something that I kind of reflect on all the time and I'm very aware of within the research. There's also a challenge, I think it's been talked about a bit already, in terms of different people's accounts of different things. So for a lot of these young people, they might be masking at school and they might be having difficulties that they're not talking about. But when I'm talking to them and engaging them with these creative research methods, I am interested in what they're saying. But then when we talk to parents or carers, sometimes the parent is saying, that actually their child is really struggling and they're coming home from school and they're really upset and they're really distressed. But then when I'm talking to the young person, they're not mentioning that for whatever reason, and that's fine. That's their choice to do that. But it is kind of an ongoing question of how to treat that, knowing that information, but also respecting the first-hand account that the young person is offering. Lorna, again, I don't know if you have anything you wanted to add on that.
I think you've covered the major points, Kathryn. I would just agree, I think, with other panelists that, you know, doing participatory research well can be quite a slow process, and there's nothing wrong with that. Slow science, you know, is good, but, you know, some of the structures of academia, and within Kathryn's PhD, for example, there is a time limit. So just getting the balance right between really honouring these principles in a meaningful way rather than a tick box participatory way, while also, you know, meeting the project objectives and the task objectives, and which, you know, Kathryn receiving her PhD, for example, is a key objective. So just getting that kind of constantly reflecting. So I think it's an evolving process, isn't it, within supervision meetings as we sort of reflect on. It's what Christina was talking about earlier, that sort of continuous improvement, you know, and reflecting and working out where things aren't working and where we need to shift. Yeah, but it's challenges that are totally worthwhile, I would say.
Very cognizant of time. I'll say that I agree with many of the challenges raised, and one different one is thinking about how many folks on our team, they get involved in research and they like it and they want to pursue it as a career, and there aren't many opportunities. So I'm able to pay when I have a grant, and then I don't have money when I have a grant. And so thinking about how the whole infrastructure needs to change, because many times people want to pursue this as their career path, and we don't yet have, at least in the United States, the systems to make that possible.
Thank you again. I'm not sure who's checking the questions. If Martina is talking at the panel, maybe she's not. Who's doing that?
I was checking.
Are there any questions? No, double tasking, Martina.
No, I was trying to, because it's a specific question for Silke, I think.
Okay.
So it's from Rita Serra. So she, if I remember correctly, she works in participatory research in Portugal. So she says, we did our first participatory research with autistic people led by a self-advocacy association in collaboration with a research center and neurodivergent professionals on experiences and access to mental health services by autistic people, barriers and facilitators. I would love to know from Silke more about their experience and also more about autistic research collectives and collaborations inside, outside academia and professionals.
Yes, maybe about the study is we did a two-step answer format for the question on how to improve or what are the barriers for access to outpatient psychotherapy. First, we did a survey in the autistic community. There was an online survey, and it was decided to be an online survey for accessibility and not a group or a discussion. And also we wanted to get, actually really were into getting some quantitative data, because that's somehow the currency, it seems, a lot of times, in which you can bring your points forward. I'm not in favor of this. Like, qualitative methods are still a little bit more looked down, but it seems to be the way still, if we are honest about this. Quantitative science and qualitative have not been, or have not grown together that much yet. So we wanted a more mixed methods approach, and first asked the autistic community about needs during psychotherapy and also access difficulties, and we were able to show that some points are not true, which are uttered sometimes, like maybe they're not patient enough to wait a long time and they just feel it like it's too much time to wait for treatment, and so on. And we had 4 different comparison groups also in the field of mental health, which are also more of a chronic condition, like ADHD, personality disorders, but also depressed patients. And we're also able to, like show that some of the things which are thought, which are on our side of that we are the problem, are not really that way. Like, for example, people were willing to take up actually quite long distances for a psychotherapeutic treatment, and everyone said maybe they just are, trying to find someone too close by and such things. But the main point that was raised was psychotherapists sent them away and didn't even take them in for any treatment because they always said, we don't have any knowledge about this. And then going back to our own department, we knew that in psychotherapist training in Germany, autism is simply not part of the curriculum. So that wasn't a surprise. You can explain all this data very well with real life circumstances. And it's not part of the curricula. And of course, if somebody's doesn't feel well prepared, then I would also say, like, maybe you go to some person that has a training in this field with autism. But the problem is there is not enough in Germany. So then we starting from this point, we asked the psychotherapists, outpatient psychotherapists, more than 500 all over Germany. What are, we hid it. We didn't tell them it's about autism. We asked them about a lot of diagnostic groups and about their, like experience. How much did you learn during your coursework? How well do you feel working with all kinds of different groups of patients? So it was actually hidden that it was only about, or for us, only about autism, and the others being comparison groups. And in all measures, we found that knowledge on autism was the lowest, confidence on treating someone with autism was the lowest, and so on. And then you have interesting comparison measures, but we also, and that's again, the scientists didn't come up with a question like this. We brought in all the stereotypes that we hear from psychotherapists, like, for example, autistic adults tend to be aggressive. Autism is called by vaccines. We brought in all these stereotypes, and we got answers of 43% of our outpatient psychotherapists that we surveyed still believed in the vaccination theory. And this is something that we can bring up and now present us on conferences for outpatient psychotherapy training institutes and so on. And we are quite successful because more and more training institutes are picking up this topic now, because it's so, the results are so horrible. And no scientist would have ever asked all the stereotypical questions, but they're just bad. Oh no, we have an impact on showing there needs to be something needs to be done, because basic knowledge is just not even there. It's worse than knowledge of the general society, actually. So maybe, that's maybe an answer on how one study builds up and asks the right questions, maybe in the next study.
Okay, I think there are no further questions. So I think
may I ask one question?
Yeah, you can.
Sorry.
And then I think we can
wrap up. But for Ariel, can you tell us, because I'm too curious, unless it's already published, what scale did your collaborator came up with, and then what were the unexpected results that came out?
Sure, I will quickly grab the citation. So while I'm looking the other way to grab the citation, so the group wanted to have a response scale that I'm trying to remember about different accommodations they got at work. And I thought it was simple. They got the accommodation or they didn't. And they said it's not that simple. And so we asked, I got that accommodation. I didn't get it. I kind of got the accommodation. I didn't get it, and I think it would have helped me, and I didn't get it. And I think that, and I didn't ask for it, or I asked for it and I didn't get it. There's a lot here. There's a lot there. So I will put both citations from, there are two studies that came from this work. One of them wasn't able to be co-authored by the team because of time and money, and one of them was. So I'm going to put both of those in the chat for folks to see. But the finding, essentially, if we had just said, did you get this accommodation or not, we would have reported these are the accommodations people got. It was kind of boring. But what we learned was there were all these accommodations that people kind of said, well, I never thought of it, but actually that would have helped me. And so it kind of led to this better understanding of people aren't even being offered things. And once given the idea, like, oh, that really would have helped me. So we learned more about, this was several years ago now, but we learned more about the more depth in terms of how people were thinking about their accommodations, the accommodations they wish they could have had but didn't get, and why they didn't get them. So that was it was really interesting. But I too need to go. It's still very much the workday in the United States. So thank you very much. It was wonderful to learn from everybody.
Okay, so this is not just a formality. I mean, really, thank you very much for your contribution. And in case you can, and those who are still here, see you tomorrow. We'll be back at 9:30, and the program is still rich. It's going to be mostly in Italian, quindi il programma di domani, all in Italian, no, half of it. Vabbè, il programma di domani sarà metà in italiano, metà un panel tutto in italiano e un panel misto. Ci vediamo alle 9:30, speriamo di trovarvi anche se sabato. Grazie a tutti e a tutte.
Grazie Ilaria e grazie Beatrice che
Thank you so much.
l'organizzazione.
Thank you so much to you all.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks for bringing us together. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Eleonora, also.